What's up, humans? You are listening to the What is Humans podcast with Shane Strunk and Dennis Kluba. Make sure to follow us on our social media pages, on Instagram at What is Humans podcast, on TikTok at What is Humans podcast, and on YouTube at What is Humans podcast. Today, Dennis and I are discussing control the narrative. Enjoy. Hey.
Hey, what's going on? You're listening to the What is Humans podcast with Shane Strunk and Dennis Kluba. This is your first time listening. This is a personal development podcast that Shane and I have run for almost 2 years now. And we talk about things that are going on in our lives that hopefully relate to yours at home and things that you can take away. And most importantly, we're experts in
Almost nothing.
What's going on, man?
Good to see you.
Yeah.
We're trying out some new podcast equipment
Yeah.
this past few, so I feel it feels brand new again.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
Beginner's mindset for sure here.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're doing a new sport or something, and I'm like overthinking everything. I'm like,
It's like learning photography or video editing. It's a new language.
Yeah,
for us,
completely. But yeah, man, it's been good. We're making a lot of growth, a lot of moves here today, but we're talking about control the narrative, right?
Yeah. I was joking with Dennis before. Your sister is in PR.
Yeah.
So we were kind of pulling like a lot of ideas in business around like what we can control, what we can impact.
Mm-hmm.
We found some like PR examples that I think tie a lot to the philosophy that we talk about.
Yeah.
Of like what's within our control, like from a mindset perspective and like a habit perspective.
Yeah.
But we're also relating it to business too. So
Yeah.
did this idea come from anywhere or?
I basically was like on a run, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I remember repeating the phrase over and over, like, control the narrative, like a bunch of times. And I was thinking about how, like you said, businesses have such a response and PR crisis management team surrounding them based on when things go wrong within public perception and things like that. And it just got me thinking that within our own, kind of worlds and our own mental existence, so many times things go wrong within our lives, daily, weekly, yearly, but we don't usually right away in a timely manner say like, okay, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to respond? It's much more we let that emotional, side come out and we kind of freak out, as opposed to what most corporations do, which is don't freak out.
Right.
I
think something that could be helpful for us to go through is let's like give, I guess, some examples of, we talked about crisis in like PR.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like examples of like crisis in our personal life that we can relate to this PR example of how do we manage during difficult times or through difficult disasters that happen. So, it could be the loss of a job, right? It could be a breakup. It could be, millions of different things that we, quote unquote, could bucket into that crisis management. So what examples or what, things should we be thinking about to like draw this comparison first? It's
interesting because I think that like it has a scale, right? So you mentioned two big ones that like really happen and can knock us on our ass sometimes for, if we let them months at a time. Sure. Losing your job, maybe you lose a loved one, maybe, you go through a pretty tough breakup. That's something that had been in your life for, a couple different years, all of those things. But also look at your days and look at your weeks as like things will happen throughout the day in your personal life. For example, if you're a parent, oh, well, I forgot to drop off my kid with lunch. That's a small thing that if you let it affect you, it can affect your whole day, right? Instead of being like, okay, what's the solve? It's okay. It happens. I'm human. I made a mistake. Or it could be, oh my gosh, I overslept my alarm. That could lead to the whole rest of the day being just a complete waste because you're constantly trying to make up for that. Instead of, okay, right now, what can I control? All I can control is getting dressed, getting to the office, and owning up to that. Hey, this is what happened.
Yeah, all of those examples are like a clear, like a positive way to think about accepting the reality.
Yeah.
Of accepting exactly where you are. This happened. It can suck.
Yeah.
But the only thing the first step is seeing where exactly you are.
Yeah.
What went wrong. The worst thing to do is to not deny it happened.
Yeah.
To deny, this isn't real.
Yeah.
I can't deal with this right now.
Yeah.
Because there's no steps forward to resolving it or to overcoming it. So I think that's kind of the first awareness thing that we have to do.
Yeah.
Whether that's in like the business example or in, shit happening in your life of that awareness of where you are.
And I think you touched on denial, right? And one of the first things that they talked about when we read this article, and we'll link it in the show notes, but it was from Forbes talking to 15 different like PR experts. And from a business perspective, one of those things is the worst thing that you could do is deny it. Not only because, hey, like you're acting from an emotional perspective, but then also because most of the time when people see that from the public's point of view, it's gonna like enrage or bring more light to that thing happening. And it makes complete sense, right? When you see things going on at work or when there's drama in your own life, it's when people say, oh, that's not what happened. That didn't happen. When it's like, hey, all you have to do is admit right away and be like, hey, yeah, I did oversleep. This is what happened. This is how I'm going to make up for it.
But it's also something we can relate to of ignoring problems in our life. It's very clear from the business perspective too, an individual standpoint of what happens when you ignore the problem.
Yeah.
When you ignore that this is happening or you live in that denial.
Yeah.
How that will come back in a worse manner.
Yeah.
Just like it does in the PR example.
The other thing in the PR example, they mentioned that one of the first things too, after, recognizing or taking stock of where you're at, is responding in a timely manner. Right. And that's funny when we talk about it from a public's perspective, because we expect these big corporations to respond. Okay, we got to get a statement out right away. And you think about what goes through your own mind emotionally, mentally when something bad happens. It's so important to understand what's happening and immediately catch those internal dialogue in a timely manner, right? As soon as you start saying, like, I can't, or it wasn't my fault, or blaming someone else.
We had this.
Yeah.
If I don't, or it's like all the if will.
Yeah.
If I do this, if I had this, if the time was right here.
Yeah.
Versus the I can do this. I am willing. Willing.
Yeah.
I can choose.
I'm able.
Choose.
Yeah. And that's the thing where it's like right off the bat, you have to do that really quickly, because the more time that you let happen, all of those statements start to creep into your mind. Okay, what's the excuses that I can make? How is this not my fault? Let me blame somebody else. And first off, Shane and I, we're not perfect at taking responsibility or recognizing the agency that we have.
About it so we can
get better.
We need help in this space. Yeah.
And one of the quotes that we actually read from another article that we read, that again, we'll link, is this one that was really interesting, which was kind of in a funny perspective, is as soon as, I'm paraphrasing, but as soon as, individuals start this thing of self-justification, they become Einstein, they become Shakespeare and somebody else at explaining why things aren't their fault.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting, because it's so true of, as soon as we have to come up with a reason or an excuse, our mind goes 100 miles per hour to produce that.
Yeah, because we don't want to be seen, or we have it hurts our ego in some kind
reputation.
of way. Reputation, yeah.
And if we use that almost, right, if we did the proactive thing of, okay, right off the bat,
this happened.
Yeah.
I'm involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
However, I can be involved in changing this and improving it.
Yeah.
Or taking on this situation as something I can impact versus this wasn't my fault. This was happenstance. Like this was
the environment around me.
All these external things.
Yeah.
And if we seek that justification always, we won't be involved in making any changes or improvements in that situation.
No. And I think too, as like somebody that has, like, you've been in situations, and we all have, of times where we're technically like the leader or the boss, you know, or something like that. So maybe somebody's underneath of us. The biggest thing that people really want to hear in that situation, as much as you think from an internal perspective, oh, I want to save my reputation, I want to try and salvage this, or I don't want to take ownership. The only thing that your boss, or maybe it's your partner, you know, oh, you let me down. All you have to do is come clean and be like, this is what I want to do to remedy it.
Yeah. And
it almost makes it way worse the minute that you start like, oh, well, traffic or this. It's like, hey, I don't care. All I care about is you're here now.
Right.
How can we make up for time lost, or how can, we remedy that situation? And so it's interesting, our internal dialogue of, I can save this versus I should just address where we're at and move forward.
Pushing the problem down the road, or starting where you are to address it. Doesn't mean it's going to be solved right away.
Yeah.
Like it's a crisis or it's a problem.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to be solved right away by you acting quickly.
Mm-hmm.
However, by you acting quickly and having the mindset of accepting the reality that is, you can at least be taking steps forward to solve it compared to waiting for it to resolve itself.
Completely. And I think too, when we talk about like brands or corporations, they talk about reputation. And I think we talk about grace a lot, like on this podcast, and, recognizing that you are a work in progress. And it's like, if you do mess up or you find yourself in a crisis situation, it's like, you can also look at it from the perspective of, hey, say you're late to work for whatever reason. Maybe it was in your control, maybe it wasn't. But if you've been on time to work for the past year and this is the one time, recognize that, hey, yes, I'm late to work. Let's fix it. But give yourself grace and be like, my reputation overall and the work that I've put in prior has proven that I am a reliable employee, counterpart, etc.
Right. Don't let that situation affect the rest of your day or your tomorrow.
And it's interesting. I always go back to this too. I think of like professional sports. I think of MLB, where MLB players have that goldfish mindset of, if they are successful at the plate 1/4 of the time,
right,
you're getting paid millions of dollars. So think to yourself, when one thing goes wrong,
right,
you're probably going to want to be better than 25% at your job, right?
Yep.
But if you're at 90% of the time,
right,
1 out of 10 times, even if you're late 1 out of 100, 99% of the time you just crushed it.
There's some too also like these situations as being incredible learning moments. Like the baseball example, like I don't know if like you can learn from every pitch like you can like a problem that arises. But it's like take these situations by addressing it quickly, without leading with emotion. As a situation where you can learn from. And maybe you don't repeat this behavior again.
Yeah. I think too, when you get more aware, and we talk about this a lot, like failing is not failure. It's a learning opportunity, right? And as somebody, if you're going to be, you're taking risks, you're putting yourself out there, you're following your curiosity, you're willing to be uncomfortable, you're going to have multiple instances of these crises in a row, right? But the better that you get at controlling that narrative within your internal dialogue, you then are like, oh, that's nothing. Like, you're, because you practiced it.
It's a habit.
Yeah. And equally, you get into the other habit of, if your first thing is negative, when, oh my gosh, like, you're blaming somebody else or it's out of your hands, that's also a habit of, people are going to notice that, and you're also going to get into this pattern of, well, it's not my fault, hands off. And that begins to feed you and then we talked about this in the beginning, which I think we'll kind of rotate into, is control or agency over things, even though at the time it seems difficult to like take ownership of, hey, I messed up.
Yeah.
That is the only way you'll feel free, is when you like grab that problem by the horns and say, hey, yep, but I'm going to do something about it. Yeah. The minute you push it off to somebody else, you're totally at the mercy or the will of what that person's going to do, or somebody else.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that example of being involved in solving your own problem, of improving your own situation, of just controlling what you control or impacting what you can impact, is super crucial in your willingness to do it again and again and again.
Yeah.
If you so often fall into the habit of blaming or pushing away the problem, you aren't going to ever want to improve your situation, because you don't have the mindset that you can impact it.
Yeah.
So it's something that you have to practice. It's something that you have to be willing to take on, although it might be uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think it's also kind of like a proactive exercise as well, almost before crises come up. Like, I think I've gotten better at this as I've kind of gone through crises, but like saying to yourself every day, or, like, I'm totally, like, all my dreams are within my reach. I'm totally capable. So that if something does happen, like, I feel like now, because of the things I've gone through and like overcome, it's like, okay, I can figure that out.
Yeah.
And obviously I have to keep practicing it. You have to continue to get better. But if you're always like, yes, I am in control, you have that unstoppable, like, doesn't matter what happens.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
I've been through something like this before. How do we want to think about creating better patterns or habits of controlling our own narratives?
Yeah. I think that the biggest 3 takeaways, because really in the article, it's like 15 things from PR people, right? For corporations. But I think we'll have 3 big ones that are, key. I think the first thing that you said was basically taking stock and addressing where you're at. Whenever something in your mind bad happens or challenging happens, right? A crisis, because...
Yeah, avoiding the denial of it. Like, avoiding... just be wary if you're denying the situation or avoiding the situation. We have to accept the reality of where we are, of the problem.
Yeah. And I think that also allows you the ability to be like, oh, it's not that bad. Because a lot of times we can let our imagination and mind run of, oh man, we're screwed.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, slow down. Look at where we're at. We're okay.
Right.
Let's fix it,
I think a second could be, like, are we acting out of emotion? Are we acting because our ego might be affected?
Yeah.
And most of the time, if we're making decisions off of fear or how it might look, it's probably the wrong decision.
Yeah.
We need to be acting, in a way where we're going to impact what we can impact, control what we can control, even if it means we might look bad. We might, it might be a problem. It might be something that we failed at.
Yeah.
Because if we play the blame game, we won't be solving.
No. And I think, like you said, it's separating emotion from logic and being exact on, okay, this is what we can control right now. Nothing more, nothing less. And then, like you said, it's separating that ego from, okay, I don't feel hurt.
That could be steps 2 and 3.
Yeah. Because I think the third step is definitely what is going to be your movement forward. And like you said, you kind of talked about a lot, is being involved in the steps forward, in the solving process, right? That soul taking ownership of the movement forward not only gives confidence in the people around you, whether that's clients, relationships, that's your employees or your boss, it also gives you agency over, I can remedy this situation. As opposed to maybe saying to your boss or saying to someone else, hey, I messed up. Can you fix this? Be like, hey, this is where we're at. I messed up. I'm going to fix it.
Yeah. It also gives you the practice, like you said, of when the next crisis or problem
Yeah.
arises, you've been through this because you were heavily involved in something similar like this. So
Completely.
It's a cycle there.
It does make me think real quick before we leave of kind of like we've been rewatching Suits recently. It does make me think of how like a lot of times Harvey and Jessica, like they almost don't tell each other because they like fix it.
Yeah.
And like they try and fix it, but then it always, every episode's the same of, you should have told me, go fix it. And that's where it's like just taking the ownership, but also probably keep other people in the loop of, hey, I messed up, I'm working on it, et cetera.
For example. Why are we talking about controlling the narrative?
Man, I like I said, it was a mantra that was repeated in my head a couple different times. I thought that there was a lot of, interesting topics within it. But I think that right now, this idea that your internal dialogue, which we've talked about a lot, is so important too. I am capable of changing my life, my situation. When trouble arises, if you're taking those steps to be uncomfortable, knowing that you are totally in control of, I can solve this problem. I can do what's in my control to remedy this situation. It's so powerful. And like right now, that's what I want to work on. Just continuing on that journey of I can affect change in my own life.
Yeah, totally. Why I love this topic was it's just similar to a lot of the themes we've talked about of like how we do have agency in impacting our own life and growing, as individuals. And it's so important to have that internal dialogue and understanding that you can do that. In this example of like in PR or, blaming our environment and our situation is just something that I need to be aware of because I do it. We all do it.
Yeah.
So it's just something I want to continue to practice.
For sure. Let's go over a little bit of a recap. So today we talked about controlling the narrative.
Yep.
Really, this idea kind of came from this combination of worlds of corporate crisis PR, but then what goes on in our own individual emotional minds of, oh man, I messed up, playing the blame game.
Yeah, is it our ego? Is it our emotions? Are we acting quickly? Can we take steps forward to make change or make growth in this situation?
Completely. And then we kind of got into the hows of how we can improve on that practice. So first and foremost, we talked about really as soon as the crisis hits, stop, take stock of where you're at, because that can really tell you right away, oh, things aren't that bad. Things are manageable. Let's just address it,
Totally. And then our second was really just around how we need to be involved in that change to have that agency to improve our situations because we can. And by being involved and having that agency, we can then build that habit, that practice of acting quickly when crisis arrives.
Yeah. We also talked about separating that emotion from that logic of, hey, the first thing that you're going to want to do is, oh, my ego's hurt. Deny right away, be like, no, it wasn't me. Yeah. Instead, just be like, hey, they're not calling out you. Right. They're saying, hey, this is the situation. Acknowledge it.
It is what it is. Yeah.
Separate it and move forward.
Yeah. And then we went to our whys. My why was, it's just something a theme of ours on this podcast of how we need to be involved in our own change and our own growth. And we forget how much we can impact in our own lives. And it's something that I want to practice of being involved in my own growth instead of blaming or letting life come to me.
I love it. And then I really just talked about this mantra of control your own narrative was all just this, mission that I've been on to recognize agency within my own life. And no matter what, you can always change, the point that you're in.
And I think that wraps another week of
What is Humans. Thanks, guys.